In Lagos, Chief Harold Williams, a powerful black Nigerian patriarch, has everything. Estates, a hotel empire, a name that makes boardrooms tremble. But wealth can't quiet the question clawing at his heart. Who would love me if I had nothing? He fakes a fatal diagnosis, hides cameras in the walls, and watches his black family unravel. Greed, betrayal, and a wife's secret flame. Only one stays, Amara, the overlooked black daughter who bathes, feeds, and prays beside him. From a mansion of marble to a village of red earth, Harold seeks truth and returns like a lion to pass judgment. Legacy isn't inherited, it's earned.
Harold Williams had everything a man could dream of: sprawling estates in Lagos, a luxury hotel chain across West Africa, a family business worth millions, and a name respected in boardrooms from Nairobi to Johannesburg. Yet, on a quiet Sunday morning, as he sat alone in the grand study of his three-story mansion, all he could feel was emptiness. The marble floors gleamed, the air conditioner hummed softly. On the wall hung a massive oil painting of the Williams family, taken 5 years ago. Everyone was smiling, his wife Ebele in her gele and lace, their 4 children dressed in designer outfits, and Harold himself regal in his agbada. But today, that painting felt like a lie. He stared at it for a long time and whispered, "Who among them truly loves me? Who would stay if I had nothing left?" At 72, Harold was a man of legacy, feared in the boardroom, honored in his village, envied in elite circles. But now, approaching the dusk of his life, he feared something deeper than death. Dying alone, unloved, forgotten by the very people he built his empire for. So, he made a bold decision. A dangerous one. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Later that day, Harold summoned 2 men he trusted more than his own blood. Mr. Carter, the family lawyer who had managed his estate for over 30 years, and Dr. Obi Allen, his personal physician since the late 90s. They sat across from him in the mahogany-paneled study as he explained his plan to fake a terminal illness and observe who in his family would truly care if he had no money, no power, no future. Mr. Carter raised his brow but didn't object. Dr. Allen leaned back in his chair, stunned, then slowly nodded. "I'll prepare the diagnosis. Stage 4, pancreatic cancer, 6 months left." Mr. Carter added, "I'll set up a temporary offshore account and move half your assets out of reach. Let's see who comes running and who runs away." And just like that, the most painful performance of Harold Williams' life began. The next morning, the mansion echoed with exaggerated coughing. Harold stayed in bed, refused food, and asked to be left alone because the pain was too much. Ebele, his wife of 45 years, stood at the door with a worried face, but didn't enter. "Let the doctor come first," she said. The 4 children, Tunde, the first son, a swaggering businessman, Kwame, the quieter second son, Zina, glamorous and social, and Amara, the youngest, soft-spoken and warm, were all called home. Dr. Allen arrived promptly and performed a convincing exam in front of everyone. Then, with a grave expression, he dropped the bombshell. "It's cancer. Stage 4. 6 months, maybe less." Gasps filled the room. Zina collapsed onto the couch in tears. Tunde stared blankly, stunned. Amara covered her mouth, visibly shaking. Ebele leaned against the wall, whispering, "Oh God." At first, the family reacted like any family would. They wept, they brought soup and medicine, they posted cryptic messages on Instagram and WhatsApp. Life is fragile. Hug your parents today. But Harold was watching, listening, recording. From a tiny camera hidden in his bookshelf to the discreet microphone under his pillow, every conversation was documented, every reaction logged. He wasn't dying, but something in him already was. This was no longer about wealth or legacy or pride. This was about truth.
The news of Harold Williams' terminal illness spread through the mansion like a wild bushfire. After Dr. Obie Allen's grim announcement, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months at best, the house transformed overnight from a palace of wealth to a theater of fear. The family went into overdrive, or at least they put on a good show. Zena, the first daughter, burst into tears right there in the living room, sobbing into her silk caftan. "Daddy, please don't leave us," she cried, her manicured fingers trembling as she clutched his hand. But within hours, her Instagram was updated with a filtered photo of her and Harold from years ago, captioned, "My heart is broken, prayers up, #family first, #fighter." The likes flooded in. So did the sympathy. So did the performance. Tunde, the eldest son, stood by the fireplace, silent but calculating. He asked few questions about the illness. Instead, he quietly pulled Mr. Carter aside the next morning. "I think it's best for Dad to focus on resting. The company can't run itself. I'll handle day-to-day operations at Williams & Sons Holdings." Mr. Carter raised an eyebrow. "You think that's what your father wants?" "I'm the first son. He knows I'm ready." The next day, Tunde arrived at the company office in a sharp blue suit, took his father's leather chair, and called a board meeting. "Until further notice, I'll be overseeing operations," he declared. Some board members applauded. Others exchanged cautious glances. One loyal executive, Mr. Okoro, stood up and asked, "Has Chief authorized this?" Tunde smiled thinly. "Chief can't speak for long these days, but he trusts me. Just wait and see." Back at the mansion, Ebele, Harold's wife, began to act like a quiet widow in training. She wept dramatically at lunch, refused to eat dinner, and told the staff not to speak too loudly in the hallways. "His spirit is already fragile," she would whisper. But curiously, she never spent more than 2 minutes in her husband's room. Every time Amara, the youngest daughter, asked her to come sit with him, she would wave her off. "It's too painful to watch. You think I'm heartless? I'm just overwhelmed." But Harold, lying in bed with his eyes closed, was listening to every word. Kwame, the second son, was less theatrical, but just as slippery. He paced around the house with his laptop, taking Zoom calls, telling clients that Dad is very ill, but we're keeping the legacy strong. He kept mentioning words like strategic restructuring and rebranding. "What are you restructuring?" Amara asked once. "Dad's legacy," he replied with a dry smirk. "You wouldn't understand." Only Amara stayed close. Some would say too close. She was in the room morning to night, bringing pop and yam porridge, changing his bed sheets, wiping his brow, and softly singing lullabies from their childhood village. "Daddy, I'm right here," she whispered one night, holding his hand while he pretended to sleep. "Don't be afraid. Even if they all walk away, I won't." Harold wanted to open his eyes and hug her right then, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not until the others showed their true faces. And they did. Quickly. On the third day, Zena came to visit, in full makeup, tight jeans and high heels. She brought Harold a smoothie. "Organic mango turmeric, Dad. I got it from that health place in Lekki." He sipped it once and coughed. It tasted like guilt. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said, already halfway out the door. But tomorrow didn't come. She stopped visiting after that. By the end of the first week, Harold's room had become a silent prison. Only Amara entered regularly. Everyone else had moved on, to the company, to spa appointments, to parties. Downstairs, Tunde was hosting a strategy session with friends, drinking imported whiskey and talking about launching a luxury fashion brand under the family name. Imagine Williams' signature, bags, cologne, everything premium, he boasted. Dad would have loved it. No one asked how Dad was doing that day. No one knocked on his door. No one noticed when he barely touched his food or lay in darkness for hours. But in that darkness, Harold Williams was documenting everything. The fake tears, the rushed visits, the lies, the silence. His heart broke a little more each day, but not from cancer, from clarity.
The first week was performance. The second week was reality. By day 10, the sympathy had worn thin. The house no longer echoed with footsteps checking in on Harold. The door to his bedroom, once pushed open with urgent concern, now creaked quietly only when Amara entered. The rest of the family had returned to their routines, not the routines of care, but of convenient forgetting. Ibele, his wife of 45 years, no longer even pretended. "I can't stand the smell of that room," she said sharply to one of the maids. "It's like death is waiting in the air." She stopped cooking, stopped checking in. She moved her wardrobe into the guest bedroom and told the housekeeper to burn incense near her new mattress. "He's still alive, Mama," Amara whispered when she overheard her. "He's still your husband." Ibele snapped back without turning around. "And I'm still a woman who needs peace." Tunde, now fully self-installed as CEO of Williams & Sons Holdings, barely returned home. He claimed to be running the company, but what he was really doing was bleeding it dry. He fired longtime staff, cut department heads who had worked beside Harold for decades, and hired flashy friends with no experience but big visions. The company started hosting lavish mixers in upscale hotels. One boardroom became a DJ-equipped event space. He purchased a new black BMW and justified it as brand representation. In one staff meeting, Tunde stood before the employees in a designer kaftan and said, "Dad built a legacy. I'm building a lifestyle." Kwame, meanwhile, was accessing his father's secondary accounts, using a forged signature that Mr. Carter had intentionally left unguarded. He arranged for the sale of a prime piece of land in Banana Island, one Harold had saved for a future community school project. "He won't need it now," Kwame said to himself, sipping champagne in a private club while the paperwork went through. The buyer? A company secretly registered under his friend's name. Zena barely showed up at the mansion anymore. When she did, it was usually to raid the wine cabinet, do a quick Instagram story in the garden, and leave. One afternoon, she stormed in angrily. "Why is that land in Lekki not sold yet?" she demanded of her mother. Ibele replied coldly, "Let him die first, then we'll clear everything." Upstairs, Harold heard that conversation through the tiny mic hidden under his side table. He didn't cry, not this time. Instead, he whispered into the darkness, "You will all inherit nothing." Downstairs, things got louder. One night, Tunde threw a celebration of legacy party at the mansion, claiming it was to honor his father. But there was no mention of Harold, no speech, no photo, no moment of silence. Instead, there was loud Afrobeats, exotic cocktails, and a new banner, "The future is now, Williams Holdings 2.0. One of the maids came upstairs in tears. "Sir," she said, standing in the doorway of his room, "they're partying downstairs. I thought you should know." Harold coughed quietly and nodded. "Close the door, please." Meanwhile, Amara remained his only light. She now cooked all his meals herself. She researched herbal teas, stayed up reading about cancer diets, and even called traditional healers in Mbale village asking for help. Every night, she sat by his bedside, rubbing his back, reading him psalms, telling him stories from childhood. "Remember that time you carried me on your shoulders through the flood in Yola?" she asked once, smiling through tears. Harold opened one eye, barely whispering,
I remember. My brave girl. She tucked his blanket tighter. I'm going to carry you now, Daddy, until you're well again. He wanted to tell her everything, the truth, the cameras, the test, but not yet. Back at the company, the consequences were piling up. Vendors weren't being paid. Staff turnover skyrocketed. Loyal clients began pulling their contracts. The finance department quietly reported that several accounts were drained. Tunde ignored all warnings. Growth is messy, he declared at a board meeting. You can't build the future with old thinking. One executive replied, you can't build anything without money. That same week, Kwame tried to sell the Sunray Grand Hotel, Harold's crown jewel property, a 5-star resort in Victoria Island. What he didn't know was that Mr. Carter had arranged trusted buyers to intercept the deal. The hotel was sold, but all documents were immediately secured and transferred back into Harold's private offshore trust. By day 21, the house had become a silent battlefield. No one spoke at dinner. Ebele barely acknowledged her children. Tunde and Kwame avoided eye contact, each suspecting the other of moving behind their back. Zena stopped coming altogether. Only Amara remained, the forgotten daughter, now holding the crumbling family together. And upstairs, Harold lay still, silent, and deeply awake. The coughing was no longer fake. It had become real, a side effect of the emotional poison around him. He stared at the ceiling and thought, if I died today, would they even wait for my body to cool before dividing the inheritance? The room was dark. The air was heavy. But in the corner, Amara knelt in prayer. And Harold finally let a tear fall, but it wasn't from fear. It was from knowing. In a house where silence had replaced love and greed had suffocated care, Amara became the only sound of warmth in Harold Williams' fading world. She moved into the room next to his, not for convenience, but to be close in case he called out in the night. She set alarms every 4 hours just to check his pulse, to adjust his blanket, to make sure he was still breathing. And every morning before sunrise, while the rest of the mansion still slept in designer sheets and selfish dreams, Amara would enter Harold's room barefoot, carrying a warm basin and a folded towel. "Good morning, Daddy," she would whisper, even if he didn't respond. "Let's get you cleaned up." She washed him gently, warmed his food, spoon-fed him when he was too weak to lift a hand. She sat by the window and read aloud from the Bible, from his favorite novels, and even from old business magazines he once loved. When he coughed, real or staged, she would rub his chest with palm balm, tears welling in her eyes every time the sound echoed through his ribcage. "I wish I could take the pain away," she whispered once as he groaned into the pillow. He didn't groan from illness. He groaned from shame, that his only daughter was sacrificing everything, believing in a lie, while the rest of the family trampled on his legacy just 2 floors down. One night, during a long power outage caused by a late-night storm, the mansion was lit only by candles. The staff had gone to bed. The air was thick with humidity and grief. Amara sat beside Harold, fanning him with a magazine. Her face glistened with sweat. So did his. "Daddy," she said softly, "I want to take you away from here." He blinked slowly, feigning confusion. "I've been speaking with a contact in Ghana. There's a healing center near Accra. They work with cancer patients, traditional methods blended with modern care. It's not cheap, but I'll find a way." Harold coughed once, deeply. He looked away, heart aching. "You don't have to do that," he whispered. She held his hand tighter. "I want to. I can't watch you fade away like this. You don't belong in this house anymore." And in that moment, if there had been any weakness in his plan, it would have cracked. If there had been any doubt about who truly loved him, it disappeared. The next day, Amara went to her mother, Ebele, and pleaded, "Mom, we have to fly Daddy out. He needs real care." Ebele didn't flinch. She didn't pause. She just sipped from her wine glass and said, "To do what? Die abroad? Waste money so that strangers can get rich off our pity?" Amara was speechless. She blinked, then whispered, "You don't mean that." "I do," Ebele snapped. "I've given that man 4 children, 40 years, and a life of luxury. What more does he want? If it's time to go, let him go." Amara turned and ran, not from her mother's words, but from the realization that love had left this house a long time ago. Back upstairs, she wept beside her father, holding his hand like a nurse, like a daughter, like a child begging for time. "You don't deserve this. You gave your life to this family. I'll give you mine." Harold squeezed her hand weakly, not as part of the act, but because his heart, so long armored by business, wealth, pride, was cracking open. That same week, while Amara nursed her father like a lifeline, Tunde threw another party, this time under the guise of a brand launch. He unveiled Williams' Signature, a luxury fashion line using the family name. Posters of shoes, watches, and designer bags filled the company Instagram. Investors were invited. Models were hired. But no one asked, "Where's the founder? Where's Harold Williams?" And no one cared. Except one. On the night of the launch, as Tunde popped champagne in the courtyard, Amara stood in Harold's room feeding him warm pap, wiping his lips with a soft napkin. She smiled through tears, whispering, "I know you have no much time, Daddy, but I promise your name won't be forgotten." And in that candlelit room, Harold finally broke. His hand trembled as he reached for hers. "You are the only one who stayed," he whispered. "Always." Meanwhile, Ebele had stopped visiting the bedroom entirely. She had her own quarters now, her own schedule, her own agenda. And soon, her own secrets. But Amara didn't know that yet. She only knew one thing. Her father was still breathing. And as long as he did, she would be his light. While Amara quietly sacrificed her days and nights upstairs, downstairs turned into a boardroom of betrayal. The sound of Harold's coughing had become background noise to the rest of the family, just another hum in the mansion, like the generator or the housekeeper's vacuum cleaner. What mattered now was the future. Specifically, who controlled it once Harold was gone. Tunde, the self-declared acting CEO of Williams & Sons Holdings, was the first to make a move. "Dad's condition isn't improving," he told Mr. Carter casually over the phone. "We need liquidity. I'm launching a fashion division under the company name Williams Signature. Bags, watches, luxury wear. It's going to redefine African elite branding." Mr. Carter didn't answer. He simply noted the conversation and sent a quiet message to Harold's encrypted device. "Tunde is moving fast." Within days, Tunde signed papers to sell one of Harold's SUVs, the pearl-white Mercedes G-Wagon that Harold called "my wedding gift to myself." Tunde used the money to fund the brand's launch party and place a billboard in Victoria Island. The future of fashion has a name: Williams' signature. Employees were confused. Loyal staff were nervous. No one knew who approved the change. But the name Williams still carried weight, for now. Meanwhile, Kwame took a quieter route, but no less dangerous. He reached out to a real estate agent asking for buyers for the family's landside commercial plot in Lekki. The plot was valued at over $2.5 million, a project Harold had set aside for a children's hospital. When asked for ownership documents, Kwame presented a power of attorney, forged from a copy of Harold's old signature, one that Mr. Carter had intentionally let him find. "This is urgent," Kwame said to the agent. "My father's health is failing. We want to secure our grandchildren's future." The agent didn't ask further. Greed has a way of blinding questions. What Kwame didn't know was that the buyer was actually one of Mr. Carter's own operatives, posing as a businessman from Ghana. As the money hit Kwame's account, he smiled and whispered to himself, "This family will thank me someday." He had no idea that the land was never really sold. The title was never transferred. And the money? Mr. Carter froze it within 48 hours, redirecting it to Harold's hidden trust. At home, the mansion had become a war zone. Zena found out about the Lekki plot sale by accident, overhearing Kwame on a phone call. "You sold the Lekki land? Are you mad?" she screamed, barging into the living room. "That land was meant for me." Kwame scoffed. "You? What have you ever built, except nail salons and broken promises?" Without thinking, Zena slapped him across the face. Kwame returned the gesture. They wrestled like children, pulling each other's clothes, throwing pillows and glasses. A flower vase shattered against the marble floor. The noise reached Amara upstairs. She rushed down and saw the chaos, her siblings screaming, servants trying to break them apart. "Stop it!" she yelled, her voice cracking. "Is this what we've become? Daddy is still alive upstairs, and you're down here fighting like the man is already buried." Tunde, who had just arrived from the office, looked at them all with contempt. "This is why I'm taking control. You people are too emotional." "Control of what?" Amara fired back. "Of a company you're driving into the ground? Of properties you're selling like fruit at a roadside market?" "Don't test me, Amara." "I don't have to. You're already failing the test." The next morning, Amara brought Harold his tea, eyes swollen from crying. "I'm trying, Daddy, but they're tearing everything apart. The company, the house, even each other." Harold lay still, tears pooling at the corners of his eyes. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Amara already knew he was no longer just testing them. He was watching them burn the legacy he had built, one lie, one sale, one betrayal at a time. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter kept working behind the scenes. He blocked another land sale initiated by Tunde. He secured the hotel papers after Kwame tried to list Sunray Grand Lagos, the jewel of Harold's empire, on the international market. Each time, he sent Harold an encrypted update. Each time, Harold read it silently, while Amara changed his bed sheets or fed him soup. And each time, Harold whispered the same words to himself: "Let them keep digging." In a mansion filled with whispers of greed and the stench of betrayal, only one room still smelled like hope: Amara's. And Harold knew
When the storm cleared, she would be the only one still standing.
For weeks, Ebele Williams, wife of the ailing Harold, had floated through the mansion like a woman already widowed. She wore long black robes, took her meals in silence, and rarely made eye contact with the staff. But beneath the sorrowful expressions and quiet sighs, something else was growing. Not grief, desire. It began with frequent trips to the Mirage Wellness Spa in Victoria Island. She told the staff it helped her relax and think. But in reality, she wasn't just going for massages. That's where she met Logan. He was tall, dark-skinned, with the body of an athlete and the smile of a con artist. In his early 30s, Logan worked as a gym instructor at the spa, charming, smooth-talking, and always willing to listen. Ebele first noticed him when he helped her adjust the settings on a sauna chair. Then he complimented her jewelry. Then he offered to help her stretch before her next therapy session. "You move like a queen," he whispered one afternoon, "but I can tell your heart is tired." She laughed, a sound no one in the mansion had heard in weeks. Within days, they were texting. Within a week, they were meeting at a discreet hotel on the mainland. By the second week, Logan was calling her "sweet mama," massaging her feet, whispering promises, and feeding her lies that tasted like attention. "You shouldn't suffer just because he's old," he told her one night, shirtless in bed. "You deserve to be seen, to be loved." Ebele replied with a sigh, a kiss. "I gave him my youth. I owe myself something now." Meanwhile, upstairs, Harold was growing weaker, or so the family believed. Only Amara still visited him daily. Only Amara brought him fresh towels, warm soup, and gentle prayers. Ebele? She hadn't entered his room in over 12 days. When Amara asked why, she got a cold shrug. "What for? He doesn't even know who I am anymore." Then, on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Ebele shocked the entire house. The family had gathered in the living room, arguing over the company's financial reports, when the front door opened, and in walked Ebele with Logan at her side, holding a small leather duffel bag. She smiled like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Everyone, this is Mr. Logan," she announced, placing a hand on his shoulder. "He's our new personal driver." The room froze. Zena looked up from her phone. "Mom, what are you talking about? We already have a driver." Ebele waved a dismissive hand. "Yes, but Logan will be my driver. I want someone I can trust to take me wherever I need to go." Tunde raised an eyebrow, scanning Logan from top to bottom. "This looks more like a personal toy than a personal driver." Kwame muttered under his breath, "How long before he's living in Dad's room?" But no one dared to say it aloud. Not except Amara, who happened to walk in as Ebele was giving Logan a tour. She stopped dead in her tracks. "Mama," she said slowly, "who is this?" Ebele turned casually. "He's staff. Treat him with respect." Amara stared. Logan avoided her eyes. The energy shifted. Something was wrong. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. Around 11:30 p.m., she went to the kitchen to heat pop for her father. On her way back, she noticed something. The back door to the boys' quarters was ajar. She heard soft laughter, then whispers, then a moan. Her heart slammed into her chest. Barefoot, she walked slowly toward the small staff building, her breath caught somewhere between rage and disbelief. She pushed the door open, and there it was. Ebele, her mother, was sitting on Logan's lap, both partially undressed, giggling like teenagers. Wine bottles littered the side table. Music played faintly from a phone. Amara's voice cracked like lightning. "Mama, what is this?" "Well, Daddy's lying upstairs, dying." Logan tried to explain. I was just... Get out. Get out of this house, now." Logan fled, tripping over his sandals, his shirt half on, pants unzipped. Amara turned to her mother, tears flooding her eyes. You abandoned Daddy for this." Ebele stood, breathing hard. "You don't understand. I've been lonely. He's dying. He doesn't even talk to me anymore." Amara shook her head in disgust. "He's still alive. He still breathes, and you treat him like a corpse. You treat this family like a burden. You chose pleasure over loyalty." Ebele pointed a trembling finger. "Don't you ever tell your brothers, not a word." Amara didn't reply. She simply turned and walked away, heartbroken, carrying a bowl of pop to the only person in the house who hadn't betrayed her. Upstairs, Harold watched her come in. He placed the tray down, silently. He noticed her puffy eyes. She didn't speak. He didn't ask. But he knew something had shifted. And what came next, even he wasn't ready for.
By the end of the 4th week, Amara could no longer bear it. The house was heavy, not just with silence, but with spiritual rot. Her siblings were fighting over money that didn't belong to them. The company was collapsing under Tunde's ego. Kwame had stopped pretending to care. Zaina had vanished into social media filters. And her mother was sneaking off into corners of the house with a man half her age, as if her husband of 45 years was already dead. One morning, Amara sat beside her father, watching him sleep. She had barely eaten. Her eyes were sunken, her hands trembled as she dipped a cloth into warm water and wiped his forehead. "I can't keep you here, Daddy. You don't belong in this place anymore. They've poisoned it." She made her decision that afternoon. Without telling anyone but the house driver, she packed a small bag with Harold's essentials, his medications, though mostly unneeded, his glasses, a change of clothes, and a folder of family documents she didn't even realize were fake. By nightfall, she had arranged everything. The driver, a quiet man named Kelehi, was loyal to her, and more importantly, to Harold. They left just before midnight. No one noticed. No one asked. They drove for 8 hours through the dark back roads of Nigeria, heading to a place Amara barely remembered from childhood, Mbale village, her father's ancestral home. By sunrise, the air had changed. It smelled of firewood and wet earth. The sounds of traffic had been replaced by chickens, morning prayers, and a breeze that actually felt like peace. When they arrived at the old family compound, the wooden gate creaked open slowly, and villagers gathered as if summoned by spirit. "Is that Chief Harold?" An elder rushed forward. "Chief is sick?" "Yes," Amara said, helping her father out of the car. "He needs rest. He needs something real." The people didn't hesitate. Some brought mats, others fetched water, a few stood with arms crossed, eyes full of concern and quiet loyalty. They had not seen Harold in years, but they hadn't forgotten. "This is the man who built our school," one said. "He paid for my daughter's surgery," another whispered. "He gave us light when no one else cared," an elderly woman added, holding a bowl of fruit. Harold was carried gently into the main hut. It was old, but solid. The roof was thatched, the floor smooth red earth, the bed simple but clean. It was the opposite of luxury, and for the first time in weeks, Harold Williams exhaled. Within hours, news had spread across the village. Chief is back, and he is ill. Dozens came to visit. They brought herbs, yam, coconut water, boiled cassava, palm wine, and most importantly, presents. They didn't ask about his will, they didn't whisper about his company. They prayed, they offered stories, they wept at his bedside. Later that day, a Mama Oge pulled Amara aside. "My daughter," she said, eyes sharp with wisdom, "you brought him back before the darkness swallowed him. For that, the ancestors will bless you." Amara nodded, too tired to respond. But Mama Oge wasn't finished. There is a healer here, not a magician, a man of both root and spirit. Let him see your father." Amara hesitated, then nodded. The next morning, just after dawn, the healer arrived. He was tall, dark, and wore a white robe made from local fabric. His hair was tied back, and his face painted lightly with chalk, not for show, but tradition. He entered the hut, knelt beside Harold, and studied him, without speaking, for several minutes. Then he turned to Amara. "Leave us," he said. Amara stepped outside. Inside the hut, the healer placed a hand on Harold's chest and closed his eyes. After a long silence, he spoke. "Your body is strong, Chief, but your spirit is tired." Harold opened his eyes. "I'm not sick," he whispered. The healer didn't flinch. "I know. I was testing them, my family, my wife, my children." The healer simply nodded. "And what did you find?" "Rot," Harold said. "All except one." The healer gave a quiet smile. "You are a wise man, Chief. You use death to reveal truth. But what now?" Harold stared at the ceiling. "I don't know." "Then let the land remind you. Where there is decay, new things grow." When Amara returned to the hut, the healer stepped out. She rushed to him. "Will he live?" He smiled gently. "He already is." She blinked, confused. "I thought you brought him here to be healed, but I think he brought you here to find peace." He walked away, without another word. Amara turned back to the hut and found her father sitting up in bed, staring out the window. "Daddy?" she said softly. He turned to her and smiled. No cough, no weakness, just peace. That night, under the orange glow of a village sunset, Harold sat outside on a wooden stool. The sky was calm. The trees swayed gently. A chicken walked past his foot like it owned the earth. Amara handed him a bowl of yam porridge. He looked up at her, eyes filled with clarity. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For not leaving when everyone else did." Amara smiled, and for the first time since the diagnosis, they ate together, not as patient and caregiver, but as father and daughter.
At exactly 8 a.m., the mansion gates in Lagos creaked open. The guards, half asleep, looked up to see something that froze them in place. Chief Harold Williams, standing tall, not coughing, not limping, not carried. He stepped out of the SUV wearing a clean white caftan, his walking cane barely touching the ground. Beside him, Amara held a simple leather bag, no luxury, no fanfare, just the quiet thunder of justice. Inside the house, the tension was already brewing. Tunde and Kwame had argued at breakfast. Zina had locked herself in her room after finding out a brand deal was canceled due to family drama. Their mother, Auntie Ifeoma, was nowhere to be found, likely in some hotel room with her gym boy lover, Ben. The front door opened. Zina came downstairs, still in her robe, and paused at the staircase. She blinked. "Daddy?" Her phone dropped. Kwame came running from the hallway and nearly tripped. Tunde, mid-call in the dining room, froze with his mouth open. Amara stepped in behind Harold. Calm, steady. She said nothing, just helped her father into his seat, the same one he hadn't used in 2 months. Chief Harold looked at them one by one. No anger, just silence. The silence of a storm gathering its power. 15 minutes later, the living room was full. Zina, Dunde, Kwame, and now Auntie Ifeoma,
who had rushed back in her church dress, still smelling of hotel soap and perfume. Ben had been thrown out by security, his duffel bag landing in the garden. The air was thick. Then Mr. Okoye, the family lawyer, arrived, as instructed. He brought with him a brown folder and a flash drive. Chief Harold finally spoke. "I was never sick." A gasp filled the room. "I do not have cancer. I never did. I asked Dr. Nwosu and Mr. Okoye to help me test this family, to know who truly loved me and who only waited to inherit my corpse." He paused. "The test is now over." Kwame stood slowly. "Daddy, Sit down," Harold said firmly. Kwame sat. "Everything that happened while I was sick," Harold continued, "was recorded. Every room, every whisper, every transaction." He pulled out a remote from his pocket and pressed a button. The TV lit up. CCTV footage filled the screen. First, clips of Tunde, laughing while firing the company's loyal staff, throwing parties in the CEO's office, yelling at board members, "It's my father's company. I run it now." Then Kwame, handing over land documents to strangers, accepting cash in envelopes, giggling with a new girlfriend in a hotel room. Then Zena, screaming at the maid, "Why should I cook for a dying man?" Dancing on TikTok as #RichKidsLife played in the background. Finally, Ifeoma, kissing Ben in the boys' quarters, telling him, "Once Harold dies, we can do anything we want." The room fell into pure, frozen silence. Zena wept. Kwame covered his face. Tunde stared blankly at the screen. Ifeoma's lips trembled. "Harold, please." Chief Harold raised a hand. "To the one person who stood by me, who bathed me, who held my hand through it all, Amara, I say thank you." He turned to Mr. Okoye. "Read it." Mr. Okoye opened the brown folder. "Effective immediately," he read. "Chief Harold Williams transfers all ownership of his properties, companies, and bank holdings to Amara Williams, his youngest daughter." The others gasped. "Furthermore," the lawyer continued, "Tunde Williams and Kwame Williams are permanently removed from any leadership role in Williams Enterprises. Zena Williams is suspended from financial privileges until further notice. And Ifeoma," Harold said coldly, "has 24 hours to leave this house." Zena cried out, "Daddy, you can't." "Watch me," Harold replied. Security guards appeared at the door, silent, ready. Harold turned to Amara. "You are the new CEO. Call back the old staff. Rebuild what they tried to destroy." Amara nodded, through quiet tears, the same quiet she carried when no one was watching. Tunde stood up, voice shaking. "So that's it? You just disown us?" Harold stared at him. "No, you disowned yourselves the moment you buried me alive." The family sat, speechless, shattered. But Chief Harold arose, tall, strong, alive. The lion had returned, and justice had a name. A month passed. Then, one morning, the large wrought iron gates of the Williams mansion opened slowly. A black SUV pulled in. The security guard stood up in shock. From the passenger seat, Rose stepped out. She opened the door, and there he was, Harold Williams. Not weak, not coughing, not dying. He walked out strong, dressed in a crisp white native outfit, supported gently by Rose's arm. The staff at the gate gasped. One nearly dropped his phone. "Is that Chief?" Inside the house, Zena was painting her nails on the living room couch.
David was scrolling on his tablet. Tunde was arguing with their mother over a furniture bill. No one heard the front door open until Rose's voice echoed. "Daddy's home." The room froze. Zina dropped her nail polish. Tunde stood speechless. David's jaw dropped. Ebele covered her mouth. What is this?" Harold Williams stood at the entrance like a returning king, calm, composed, alive. "You all look surprised," he said, voice steady. "Because you were supposed to be dying," Zina cried. "No, I was pretending." He walked past them, climbed the stairs himself, and disappeared into his room. The house remained in stunned silence for minutes. Later that evening, a formal family meeting was called. Mr. Carter, the family lawyer, arrived with a leather folder in hand. Harold sat at the head of the long dining table with Rose beside him. "I faked my illness," he began, "to see what mattered most to each of you, and you showed me." He turned to Tunde. "You fired the loyal employees I trusted. You ruined my company with wild spending. To David, you sold properties I cherished without a second thought. To Zina, you tried to sell my land before I was even buried. To Ebele, you brought a stranger into my home, into my bed, while I lay dying." They tried to defend themselves, stammering, crying, apologizing, but Harold raised his hand. "Enough." He turned to Mr. Carter. "Execute the new documents." Mr. Carter stood and announced, "Effective immediately, all remaining assets, businesses, and properties of Chief Harold Williams will be transferred to Miss Rose Williams, the only child who stood by her father with love and loyalty." The room erupted in gasps and shouts, but it was done. Rose had inherited everything, not because she asked, but because she proved herself without knowing she was being tested. A full year had passed since the storm settled in the Williams mansion. Under Rose's quiet but firm leadership, the company not only survived, it thrived. The offices buzzed with purpose again. Old employees, the ones Frank had cast aside, returned with loyalty and pride. They called her Madame Rose and said she reminded them of the old chief, calm, sharp, and full of heart. Profits doubled, new branches opened, awards came in, clients who had walked away returned. In the executive office sat Harold Williams, older, wiser, and peaceful. He watched from a corner as his daughter led board meetings with grace. Occasionally, he'd smile, not because the company was growing, but because she had grown. As for the others, David and Tunde had found jobs elsewhere, far away from the company they once tried to hijack. Cynthia, now just Zina, made slow efforts to rebuild trust, dropping by once in a while to bring her father food or sit beside Rose in silence. And Ebele, no one had heard from her since she left the mansion. But none of that mattered anymore, because when it came to love, loyalty, and legacy, one daughter had passed the test, not with money or words, but with actions. And for that, she had gained everything. The end.